I was there on the field when the cannon roared wild. Took a blast for old Dan, flew a mile with a smile. Oh, I'm the leg that left the fray. General Dan's lost friend, still dancing today. Life without a thigh feels like a wild ride. Got a story to tell about my Civil War pride. Oh, I'm the leg that left the fray. General Dan's lost friend, still dancing today. In a glass case now, where we are displayed. History's oddity, legs got in May. So if you find yourself in DC or the like, pay a visit to me, Dan's Half Wild Fight. General Dan's lost friend, still dancing today. Life without a thigh feels like a wild ride. I got a story to tell about my Civil War pride. Oh, I'm the leg that left the fray. General Dan's lost friend, still dancing today. In a glass case now, where we are displayed. History's oddity, legs got in May. So if you find yourself in DC or the like, pay a visit to me, Dan's Half Wild Fight. Fight.
Two titans on the screen, they face off together. One is VTH, the other Mr. Terry. Every clip a battle, every view a measure. Subscribers flow like a thrilling endless ferry. With each upload laser edged, the tension builds high. Lights, camera, action, who's winning tonight? 500,000 dreams, race to the peak. Who's the first to break the beat? In this inbox leak, tricks and twists, VTH keeps it original. Editing supreme, sleek and cyclical. Mr. Terry schemes with content so pivotal. On this digital clock, it's a thriller ritual. Clicks and hearts determine who clocks the glory. The hive of the crowd writes history of the story. 500,000 dreams, race to the peak.
What's going on, everybody? All right, that's enough of that for now. So I've already been starring some of the questions you guys have been asking, so I'm going to get to some of those. But first of all, I've got to give some love to the Guardians. Bring on the Yankees. Should be a good series. I hope our pitching can keep up with their hitting. But it should be interesting. Never when this season started did any Cleveland fan think we were getting this far. So this is all a fun ride at this point for us. So let's go ahead and get right into the questions. And we'll probably talk a little bit about the election. And somebody asked if I was going to live stream the night of the election. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. Not entirely sure what's going to be going on at that point. So I may or may not do that, but let's take a look. So somebody, Ariel said, VTH, what is your opinion about Chelsea FC? I'm a fan of it. First of all, they have one of my favorite kits. Their uniforms, I love the color of blue that they wear. And if I was going to pick one of the big six to cheer for, it would probably be Chelsea. I've been past their stadium. I've seen the stadium when I went to see Fulham, because Chelsea and Fulham are both actually in the same city, the same borough there of London. So they're like just like a mile or two apart. They're really, really close. And I went to see Fulham play. So I love Chelsea. Don't follow them as much since Christian Pulisic left there, but I followed him a lot for a while when he was there. Tom Riddle, great name, by the way. My daughter would approve. She's a big Harry Potter fan. Feel free to wait until the live stream to answer this one, but I was wondering if you were going to react to Metatron's religious videos. Yeah, if I do, it'll be on VTH Extra, but I think I probably will at some point. And I heard that in his recent video that he gave a little shout out to me and Mr. Terry, so that was pretty cool. I like that. When there's a historical topic that you want to learn about or that you're unfamiliar with, what is your typical research process? That's actually a fantastic question. It varies. It kind of depends on what got me into the topic. A lot of the times what gets me into a topic is I see a movie or a documentary happens to be on and I watch it. What got me really into World War I, for example, is I was streaming through, like I was flipping through some streaming service. It might have even been YouTube. And there was this documentary about the Somme that I watched, and it was fantastic. And that has led to like a 4-year rabbit hole of me learning about World War I, and ending up on the History Channel talking about World War I, all because I saw that documentary. Typically what will happen is it'll start there. I'll see a YouTube video or a documentary or a movie, and then I'll usually get an Audible book that is highly rated. And I'll listen to a sample because, you know, if you listen to books on tape or audiobooks, the narrator goes a long way to whether it's good or not. And if it sounds like it's a good narration and it seems to be highly rated, I'll listen to it. Because I travel a lot and I'm driving a lot. So I'm always listening to books on Audible in the car. I've got like a backlog of books and that's usually where I'll go. And then if I'm listening to a book on Audible, for example, World War I, the first one for me was A World Undone by G.J. Meyer, which is fantastic. And there were certain things he talked about that, oh man, I want to learn more about Erich Falkenhayn, von Falkenhayn, who was a German commander-in-chief for a while. Or, you know, that this sounds really interesting. I want to go into a deep dive about this battle. And that's kind of, it's very organic, and it just kind of flows based on what I find myself interested in. Will a person from Ohio hold high office finally after 100 years? Honestly, if you'd asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have said that I think Harris and Walz have this election in the bag, but man, I don't know. This one's going to come down to the wire. I don't think anybody has a clue who's going to win this race. But it's going to come down to Pennsylvania, though. I think Pennsylvania is going to determine who wins. Any comment about I didn't watch the launch yet, but I heard about it. And I love that stuff. I can't wait to see the Artemis mission to the moon. I can't wait to watch us land on Mars down the road. I'm really excited to live through this stuff because I've always been jealous of the people who got to watch the moon landing live on TV. And I thought, what a cool historic moment to live through, especially at the end of a pretty tumultuous decade with Vietnam and assassinations and riots and civil rights movement and all these things that were happening here in the States. Where would I like to go the most that I haven't been before? Well, I can tell you what it is, but I don't think it's happening anytime soon, and that is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is at the top of my list, but I don't think I'm going to go there anytime soon. So apart from that, I would say probably Poland. And I don't have any plans for it yet, but I'd love to go to Poland. I want to go to Auschwitz Fort, where the attack of the dead men happened. I want to go to Auschwitz and experience that. I'd like to see some of the Eastern Front battles. I just picked up some funeral cards for some German World War I soldiers, and most of them died on the Eastern Front in 1915. And I'd like to go to the sites where they fought and died and tell their stories. So that's kind of high on my list right now. The man, the myth, the legend, Scott Sterling. Oh my gosh. If you guys have not seen the Scott Sterling videos, one's volleyball and one's soccer, they're so good. They're so hilarious. Just look up Scott Sterling. You will not regret it. It's fantastic. Can we get an AI song of George McClellan merely failing to win? I'm taking a picture of that because that is a fantastic idea. and I need to do some more AI songs for the AI History Song channel. Which is better, 2 consoles or 1 president? Honestly, 1 president. 2 consoles is just a recipe for disaster, I think. Rather have 1 person making the decisions than 2. Hello, and thank you. Thank you for that. Ricky Ticky Bobby Wobbin, thank you. I cannot find the 1984 mod for the campaign trail game. I can't send it to you, but I can show you how to do it. Here, I'll pull it up for you in just a second here, and I'll show you how you do the mods. It should be there. Hold on, let me share the screen here. Here we go. All right, so if you're on the new campaign trail, newcampaigntrail.com, and you scroll down here to mod loader. Oh, they've completely changed this, haven't they? So maybe you have to do new campaign trail first and hit mod loader. Ah, okay, so they did change how they do it. It's a little different, but it should be then in here, unless it's in one of those other ones. There's a lot in here. Oh, yeah, there's going to be 84 mod. There you go. So there's 84. There's 84 if Reagan was assassinated. There's 84 in the Carter verse. So what you do is you just select one of those, and then you hit load. And now you've got it. So that's how you do that. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, so that's all you got to do is just do the mod loader like that. Now that Cleveland beat my Tigers, what's your thoughts on Skubal? Fantastic pitcher, but 2 things were working against him. One, I think he got tired in that second game. And number 2, if you look at Cleveland's record against left-handed pitchers, we are way better against lefties than we are against righties. And Detroit had a bunch of left-handed pitchers, and that really helped us as facing our record is like 500 against righties, and it's way above 500 against lefties. So the more lefties we can face, the better. And Stephen Kwan is just a beast, and so was Logan yesterday. Oh my gosh, he was fantastic. Hey, American Nerd, thank you for that. If you're looking to do more Fat Electrician videos to react to, the one that you did about Carlos Hathcock, Marine Corps sniper, who's on par with Chris Kyle. So here, listen, first of all, I want to preface this by saying that Fat Electrician, I've had an opportunity to be on some streams with him and email back and forth and message with him. Super nice guy, and I love what he's doing, and I'm glad to see him succeeding. The couple of videos of his that I did, I found some pretty significant errors in his videos in terms of his history and telling the story. So I'm a little nervous about doing videos of his on topics I don't know well enough to catch the errors. And he acknowledged to me, he said, listen, I'm all about telling the story, and sometimes I get the facts wrong. And that's fine if he acknowledges that up front, but that makes me nervous to cover his videos because I'm afraid I'll miss a mistake like that. So I don't trust the facts enough unless it's a topic I know really well, if that makes sense. But I definitely will do some more of his at some point. Adam, awesome. Yeah. Guys, this is so cool. And this all came about because of one of these streams. Actually, it was one of these streams we did. And Adam said, hey, would you be interested in coming to Trinity College in Dublin while you're here? And we could do like an event. And I'm like, yeah, email me. That'd be great. And he emailed me, and then we connected on WhatsApp, and we've been talking back and forth. And I'm going to be there in Dublin at Trinity College, which is this incredibly historic university in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland. And their history club there that Adam's a part of, like Bram Stoker was a part of it, and some of these incredible people in history. And they're going to make me an honorary member, which is really, really cool. And I'm going to be doing an event there. So I am super excited about that. Cannot wait to come and join you guys. Leviticus Prime, I think Harris will win, but prepared for another 4 years of class rigged elections. Who knows? No matter who wins, the other side's going to say it was rigged. So have you ever thought about reacting to Ocean Liner designs? You know, his videos, those videos just started showing up in my recommended really recently. I think I saw one about the Lusitania that was really good. So yeah, I could definitely see myself doing that. American Nerd. Remember when people used to say for someone to become president, you had to win Ohio? Well, for Republicans to win, they had to win Ohio. No Republican has ever been elected president without winning Ohio. Democrats have. I think Nixon won Ohio in 1960, but Kennedy won the election. But no, I don't think any Republican has ever won the presidency without Ohio. But Pennsylvania is going to be key. I think Pennsylvania, Georgia. In fact, let me show you guys a couple of the things that I have been following, understanding that polls all have to be kind of taken with a grain of salt, right? Because we've seen in the past how polls have been very, very wrong. But one of the ones I like to go to is 538.com. So this is them here, and they've got this really cool one that does it kind of like as a snake, with the states all kind of set up based on how close the polling is right now. And I'm going to switch back over to the live chat for just a second so I can see where it is. So the states that are stronger one way or the other are at the far ends. And then as you get closer and the polling is closer, and then you have 270 being the line. And right now, PA, Pennsylvania, is the closest in the polling that could tip the election. In other words, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona are leaning slightly more to Trump. Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan leaning slightly more to Harris. And then you get further and further down the list. But these really are the states that are going to determine this election. Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona. I think those are the only states that are even in question at this point. I think every other state, we can say with a fair degree of certainty who's going to win. We know Trump's going to win Ohio. We know Trump's going to win Texas. We know Trump's going to win Florida. We know Harris is going to win Virginia, New Mexico, Maine, Colorado. But these ones in the middle, that's where the question is. And they're going to tip the election one way or the other. But it's hard to say. And it's tricky because the way we add up our votes, the big cities tend to come in later for some reason. And those, tend to be more Democratic. And in a state like Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, is a very conservative state. The whole rest of the state is super conservative. But there's so many people in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia that they tend to offset the conservatives in the rest of the state. So it may look like Trump's ahead early on. That's what happened 4 years ago. And then it kind of shifted as the night went on. So hard to say. Have I ever done a critique or review of Cold War clips presented by the YouTube Cold War channel? I have not. But that's definitely something I'd like to look at some point. I'd like to look at the Korean War channel that my friend Indy Nidell is doing as well at some point. I know that you're generally more of a constant change person, but where do you think our current in-progress political realignment eventually lands? That's a fantastic question, Michael. I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely realigning. I think you're seeing a shift. Surprisingly, I'm surprised by this, but a shift in labor unions to the Republicans. Never thought I'd see that, but it seems to be happening. I mean, the fact that some of the biggest unions in the country are basically sitting this one out instead of strongly supporting the Democrat candidate is a big shift. You see a shift in foreign policy with the Republicans becoming much more isolationists, at least when it comes to Ukraine. They have been, which has really surprised me. And some of those things have left me, as someone who tends to vote right and has traditionally voted for the Republican candidate for president. A big part of why I won't vote for Trump is Trump, but there are also some things that, and I've heard people say this throughout time, and I've always shook my head and thought it was strange that people said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party left me. Well, that's kind of how I feel about the Republicans. I've never identified as a Republican because I think both parties are terrible, and I wish we had like 6 parties and not 2. And I've got big problems with both of them. But I do feel like the traditional conservative slate of issues has changed to the point where I don't even recognize myself as a conservative anymore. I find myself more in the middle because of some of those changes are just not things I can go along with. So there's definitely a realignment happening. I'm not someone whose thumb is on the pulse of America enough to know where that's going to fall down yet. But it's going to be interesting. I think we need to get past the Trump phase of the Republican Party, because I think whatever happens in this election, if Trump loses, I think that's probably the end of Trump's dominance of the Republican Party. Then again, I thought that 4 years ago, so who knows? If he wins in 4 years, it's probably J.D. Vance's party, but it's going to be interesting. I think once we get past Trump another 5 or 10 years, we'll have a good idea of where this all ends up. But it's hard to say right now. So I don't know. We'll see. Michael Boswell, I have a question about scenario. D-Day is a year later. Does the U.S. use the atom bomb on Berlin, change targets in Japan? I'm going to say no on Berlin. The reason being that I think there are other factors involved, and I think the very nature of warfare in the Pacific was so different than the nature of warfare in Europe. Just the nature of how Japan fought, kind of fighting to the last man, committing suicide rather than surrendering, even the civilians. I think that was a big factor in why the U.S. was willing to use the bomb on Japan, because they saw the potential casualties. That was one factor. Obviously, there were others, but I don't think the factors that influenced the dropping of the bomb on Japan existed in Europe to make that a factor. So there's also some racial factors to all of that. I think Germany was viewed much more sympathetically by the American public than Japan was. Japan attacked us. They started the war. You know, there's the treatment of POWs and things like that that's different. There's a lot of factors, but I can't see the U.S. using the bomb on Germany now. Imagine the U.S. still chose vice president as who got second most electoral votes, a Biden-Trump presidency. I mean, yeah, in theory, that's how it would be. But 4 years before that, you have a Trump and Hillary election. So do I watch ice hockey? Not really. That's actually one of the major sports I don't really watch that much. I was into it for a while in high school when the Pittsburgh Penguins were really good. They're an hour away from here, and the owners at the time of the Penguins live here in Canfield, where I live. They now own the 49ers and Leeds United in England. But I don't really follow it too much. If I did, I'd probably be a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. Show of hands, thank you. As a pastor, what are your thoughts on Trump selling Bibles? Do I think he's really that religious? No, I don't. And here's what I'll say about that. As a Christian, kind of the core tenet of Christianity is that we as humans are irreparably separated from God because of our sin, and that Jesus dying on the cross paid the price for our sin for us to be forgiven and redeemed and restored to God. And so a core tenet of Christianity is recognizing our need for a savior and recognizing our sin. And Donald Trump once said, and this was in the last 8 years or so, that he's never done anything he needed forgiven for. And to me, that is completely incompatible with Christianity. So whatever you think of him and his character and his personality and him as a person and as a candidate, that to me rules somebody out as being a Christian, to say you don't need forgiven for anything. And I hate the Bible selling thing. Hate it. Hate it. Which specific COD am I goated? So if you're not familiar, I posted something about this last week because I found out that my 12-year-old son and his friends have gotten into playing Call of Duty, specifically the online one, the one that's kind of like Fortnite. And so I'm like, oh, I used to play Call of Duty all the time when I was a youth pastor. I would host LAN parties at my house, and we'd hook up like 5 Xboxes together, and we'd all be playing together. And then we do a Bible study afterwards. I know, I get it. We're shooting each other, and then we're talking about Jesus. But it drew the boys in. I had fantastic attendance at those youth group meetings at my house. So I'm like, oh, I'll play with you guys. So they added me to their group, and at the end of the night, my son was like, "You are goated at Call of Duty." So it was Warzone. It was the online one that, like at one point, the other 3 in my group had all been killed or had all been wounded, and there I was fighting off the enemies, and I killed 3 of the guys that killed my 3 guys, and then I revived them all. And so my son was like impressed by his old man's skills. I haven't played many first-person shooters lately because my reflexes aren't what they used to be. My hand-eye coordination is not what it used to be. I'm not as good at games like Call of Duty as I used to be. So I tend to do more like slow, like turn-based strategy games. Thoughts on Tom Waits? Michael, I actually don't know who that is. So somebody's going to have to fill me in. I'm not sure. Caden, found out you live 2 hours from the Rorke's Drift battlefield. Wow, that's awesome. Yes, Caden. So now that I have a company that I'm working with that I can do my own custom-made tours, and the first one of those is coming April 25th. It's the Germany, Prague. So it's Berlin, Dresden, Prague, Bratislava, Vienna. And it starts April 25th. And the link is in the description of all the recent videos, the links to the 2 tours, because we're doing one in Italy too, Rome and Florence. And that was one I put together completely from scratch. I picked out the cities I wanted to do. I submitted it to the tour company. They put together the tour for me. They're going to handle all the arrangements, the transportation, the ticket. We're going to have a guide the whole time with us that speaks the language. And speaks English. And all we have to do is show up and go along. So now that I know that that's possible, they do tours in South Africa. So I am 1,000% going to do a South Africa tour. I want to see Island Lawana. I want to see Rorke's Drift. I want to see the mountains there and the falls and the animal life. And I'm 1,000% coming to South Africa, and I will definitely let everyone know when that happens. Chris, just curious, how come you made a whole second channel about World War I and not the Civil War? I do have one about the Civil War. It's called Stories of the Civil War. And I have some videos ready to upload to both of those channels. So those will be going up this week. So the link's in the description to all the recent videos for Stories of the Civil War. I'm a freshman in college this year and got into a study program in the south of France, Basque region. Any historic site recommendations? That's the part of France I haven't been to yet. I've been to Normandy, I've been to Paris, and I've been to Eastern France. I have not been to the south. So I can't speak to it, but I'm sure some people in the chat, let us know, those of you who have been to the south of France, what are some of your places that you would recommend to visit in the south of France? So I'm going to try to get through all of these super chats, guys, and get to as many of the other ones as I can. He made the Closing Time song, Tom Waits. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, Daniela is right. Redcoat History has some really good videos on the Zulu War. Marseille, yeah, is in the south. That's good. Okay. Not exactly history. Always thought it was cool back when big sports moments were lit up by camera flashes. You don't see that much now with cell phones. Yeah, that's true. It's just one of the little ways in which our world has changed. You don't think about those kinds of things, but that's actually a really interesting observation to make about just the little ways that that the world has changed over time. That's actually pretty cool to think about. Let's see. Was Grant crossing the James, Rapidan, Mississippi more impressive than Washington crossing the Delaware? Yeah. It doesn't take away from Washington crossing the Delaware was a huge moment. It was a turning point. It saved the war. And it's one of the best moments for Washington. You guys, if you've been around the channel for long, I've been pretty critical Oh, okay. um, Adam, I just saw your message, so I'll address that here in a minute. But so I've been pretty critical of George Washington's abilities as a battlefield commander. Made some pretty bad mistakes in battlefields. Got outsmarted by the British on more than one occasion. But man, Trenton, that was incredible. That is one of the all-time great moments in American history, what he did in Trenton and how he pulled that off, and to not lose a single man killed in that battle. They lost a couple to exposure. So, you know, they lost some to the elements, but nobody died in battle. The closest anyone came was actually a young Lieutenant James Monroe, the future president, who was nearly died and had his life saved by one of the surgeons. But yeah, what Grant did, I think, is more impressive because he's moving huge armies. Washington did what he did with like 2,000 men, sneaking 8 miles across, sneaking across the Delaware in 8 miles and surprising sleeping Hessians. Grant did what he did deep in enemy territory, in the face of a major army that had eyes and ears everywhere. So to me, that was more impressive. Jerusalem and Bod Gaya are both wonderful places, had great travel experiences. Yeah, and I hope I get there at some point for sure. So Adam's telling me that I'm mixing up. There's actually two different history groups at Trinity. There's the one that he's a part of and that I'll be there with, and then the HIST, which is the Historical Society. So I was referring to one of the other. So and yes, Adam, please do send me some cool Trinity facts before I come, for sure. I'm definitely excited about that. I wish I had more time in Ireland. The only thing that I'm struggling with is I typically like to have at least 7 nights when I go over to Europe. I'm only going to have 5 nights in Ireland. And the reason for that is just because of the schedule. I have to cram this in between 2 things I can't get out of. So one is my ex-wife is out of town for several days for a scrapbooking retreat. And she doesn't get home till November 10th. And so that's the earliest I can leave to go to Ireland, which means I won't get there till Monday morning, the 11th. And then I have to be back because my son's end of year soccer banquet is on November 17th, the following Sunday. So I have to come back on Saturday. So I'm back for the banquet. So that doesn't leave me a ton of time. So I'm going to be doing 2 nights in Belfast and 3 nights in Dublin. And I'll probably do some excursions outside of the cities, but yeah. So Estella, thank you so much. Hope I get to see you again at some point in the near future. Harmony. Would I react to Ben Shapiro's October surprise video he just put out? So I'd have to check it out and see if it's something that would fit kind of with the channel. And if it does, then that's definitely something that I would do. Sorry, I'm just getting caught up on a couple other things that people are sending me messages about here. Okay. You got it. Thank you so much. You're trying all the scenarios to get a Republican to win all 538 electoral votes. Yeah, that would be hard with DC. It's a small miracle that Reagan came as close as he did in 1984. You prefer Real Clear Politics model? So yeah, actually that was the other one that I was going to pull up. Was the Real Clear Politics. Those are the 2 that I actually go to. So let me go ahead and pull that one up for just a second here. I'm going to switch which screen is being shared. Here we go. So here's Real Clear Politics. And so they do a couple of different things. One is that they have a rolling poll average where they take the latest version of each of the most recent polls, and then they just average them together. And this in and of itself might not tell us a whole lot, but you can look at where the last 2 elections were at the same point, and it gives you a sense of things. And Trump's actually closer to Harris in this one than he was in either of the other 2 elections. So that if the polling is as accurate as it was in 2016, then Trump's going to win. But again, this is a national poll, and national polls mean nothing. It's all about the states. And so they also have their state polls. And here's the top battlegrounds. Those are the states I just read to you earlier that are the ones that are going to determine this thing. Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. And you can see that even though it's super close on some of them, with the exception of Wisconsin, Trump's actually ahead in the polling average of all of those states. So what that tells me is that in the states that are going to determine the election, Trump might have a slight edge. A lot can happen between now and then. But overall, what that tells me is that in the states that Harris is winning, she's winning by a bigger margin than the states that Trump is winning. And that's why Harris has a national lead in the polls, even though she's polling behind in most of these swing states. So you see right there where it was when Biden dropped out of the race. Trump was ahead by 4.3%. As soon as Biden dropped out and Harris joined, it immediately became neck and neck, and it has been ever since. And I think now that Kamala Harris has lost any lasting effects of the bounce of being the candidate that came in late in the game, now things are kind of settling out, and we've got ourselves a really close race. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Am I going to play Campaign Trail again soon? Yeah, I definitely will at some point in the near future. That's a fun game. I got to find some ones I haven't done yet. Peace with Honor in 72 allows you to play as Nixon, and the decisions you make shape what opponent you get. Oh, that's actually really pretty interesting. That sounds like something that would be fun to do. Mesoamerican history, yes. And you know what? I'd like to actually get to some of those places and do some videos from those places about the history that went on there. Have I ever watched Oliver Stone's doc about the JFK assassinations? No, I haven't. I mean, I've seen his movie, obviously, about the JFK assassination, which I thought was ridiculous and crazy. Any conspiracies I find somewhat convincing. Very few, and I mentioned this in the last stream, and the reason being that the reason those things are conspiracy theories is that the preponderance of evidence points to them not being true, or else they wouldn't be conspiracy theories. They would be history. So by their nature, they're very unlikely to be even plausible, or they wouldn't be considered conspiracy theories. The one that I'm most willing to entertain, and I would give it about a 20% chance of being true, is that Hitler did not die in the bunker in Berlin in late April of 1945. I think there's some really compelling evidence that that's a complicated story. Now, does it mean that he made it to Argentina and lived for several more years? I don't know, but it's interesting. And the FBI here in the States certainly thought that there was a good possibility that Hitler had made it out. And so that one's interesting, but again, still, I don't give it a high degree of likelihood of being true. Yes, Coxmosia, 100% want to cover more African history. I've done a little bit here and there, but I definitely want to do more. What do I think the big October surprise will be? I'm not sure there's going to be one at this point. As I'm thinking about it, I can't think of a whole lot that's going to swing this election one way or another. Like, I can't think of any big story that would come out about one of the candidates that would make people say, oh, well, in that case, I can't vote for that person, like has happened in the past. So it feels unlikely. I could see some event happening in the world that might make people more likely to get off the fence for one or the other. So maybe something in terms of foreign policy, maybe something with Russia or in Israel and Gaza, Iran, something in that part of the world. I could see something like that having an impact on the election. And I could even see someone like Putin intentionally doing something because he thinks it would impact the election in some way. So kind of trying to cause an October surprise. I know you mentioned before not voting major party. And Elizabeth, thank you for that, by the way. What are your thoughts on third party, even if in PA? Torn on the issue. So listen, here's what I would say. I consider my vote to be a precious thing, and I don't subscribe to the idea that if you don't vote for one of the two major candidates, you're throwing your vote away. Because I, in good conscience, can't vote for either of the two major candidates. In this case, I'm probably not voting for anybody. I know there are other people that will be on the ballot in Ohio, and I might look into them a little bit. And if I find one I think I could support, then I'll give them my vote, even though I know they can't win. As long as we have the mindset that not voting for a Republican or a Democrat means throwing your vote away, we're never going to have a viable third party candidate in this country. We came close in 92 with Ross Perot, ended up getting 20% of the vote, which was impressive. I mean, we've had other situations, but those were typically candidates who had been part of one of the major parties and then split off. So 1860, for example, you had multiple Democrats running. 1912, you had Theodore Roosevelt, who had been a Republican elected president, who runs as a third party, but really is just running because he lost the nomination for the Republican Party. So those were third party candidacies, but not really, if you know what I mean. So I would say vote your conscience. And if you find a candidate from whatever party, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise, that you can support, vote for them. Absolutely. David, thank you. General history channels create narratives along trends. Example, Canada and past docs were made out. Have done little in wars. Now they're the most elite, badass, violent soldiers of all time. Yeah, that's actually true. There are trends in history among what people write. We talk about people having their image rehabilitated, for example. In the last 20 years, Ulysses S. Grant and Alexander Hamilton have come out of the shadows as popular historic figures who were once either ignored or not really seen as that significant, who are now getting a second life because of a trend, because somebody writes a book and it does really well, and then 3 or 4 other people write a book, and then documentaries get made and a movie gets made, and it's a snowball effect. So yeah, you're right. There are definitely trends. And now with social media and with YouTube following the idea of trends, when people see a video that does well, they try to recreate that success. And so then they do videos about that thing. So yeah, it absolutely happens. And actually, that's kind of along the lines of what we're going to talk about at Trinity College is how history is taught through social media and through YouTube, and how that's different than how it's been, and all of those sorts of things. Hold on one second. Sorry, I'm getting messages from people who are watching the stream, so I'm trying to reply to some of those as well. Yeah. So, but I for one think Canada are the best soldiers of all time. You don't mess with Canada in war, man. They're just hardcore. The man who walked through hell. Thank you. How consequential do I think this election is? Yeah, I think it is. I mean, but every election's consequential in some way. But with what's going on in the world right now, in terms of foreign policy, with the shift that is happening with our political parties, I do think it's consequential. I think it's more consequential for the Republican Party and its future, determining whether or not, if Trump loses this election, and especially if he loses it pretty convincingly, which could still happen, I think that the Republican Party goes in a very different way than, say, he wins. So I think it's more consequential for the future of the Republican Party right now than anything. Should there be more federal departments in the government? No. Listen, I am a conservative. I want less departments in the government, not more. But everybody's different on that. I think the federal government has way too much power as it is. Luis, thank you. You're a musician for an up-and-coming country band. Very cool. Ever done a video or stream about geography and history and music? I have not. I mean, I've done some things about music, and I've even uploaded a couple of my own like music videos to VTH Extra. But I love music. I'm fascinated by it. I grew up with music. I've been performing and writing and singing all my life. I grew up in a family of musicians. My grandfather was a popular musician in this area for a long time. So yeah, that'll be fun to do. Kieran, what's going on, my friend? And PA Democrats have Philly and Pittsburgh, but they also have Philly suburbs. Center County. Yeah, I mean, but Center County's not that big. I mean, you're talking, what, 30, 40,000 people. That's a blip, I think, in the grand scheme of Pennsylvania. And Dauphin County, it's Harrisburg, but even the suburbs of Dauphin County, you're talking like Lancaster County and Lebanon County, and those places are very conservative. And also, I mean, same thing with Erie. I mean, Erie a little bit, but all around Erie, all Republican. Gideon, you went to Alnwick Castle recently, and that is how it's pronounced. It looks like Alnwick, but it's Alnwick Castle. Home to the Percys, my ancestors. Yeah. I know the first Duke was called Hugh Smithson. He had an illegitimate son called James, who was the namesake of the Smithsonian Museum. Interesting. I did not know that James Smithson of the Smithsonian Museum was related to them. I know I am. I'm descended from the Percys. Hotspur Percy's one of my ancestors. I know, along with probably a million other people who have him for an ancestor. But that's really cool. And I'd like to get to Alnwick Castle. I went past it and saw it briefly from a distance as I was on my way to Scotland. Don't know about GOP moving away from Trump in the future. The difference with Trump and Reagan, though, is that the GOP is really split on Trump, whereas everybody in the Republican Party loved Reagan. And the same thing with FDR and JFK. To this day, Democrats love those guys. I don't see that changing, whereas I think Trump's a much more polarizing figure in the Republican Party. Have I read Henry V by Dan Jones? No, but I have it. It's definitely coming for me. I'm super excited to read that one. I love Dan Jones. I've read a bunch of his books already, and that's right in my wheelhouse as far as the time period that I'm interested in. So Dan Jones is one of my favorite history writers. I would also, let's see, who else would I put up there? I think Dan Jones would probably be number one for me just because of the topics that he covers. And so I'm a really big fan of his. Probably right up there with Dan Jones for me would be Ron Chernow. Every one of Ron Chernow's biographies that I've read has been fantastic. James Holland, really, really good World War II author. So he's good too. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to ask that we start kind of slowing down on the super chats. Just because I've got a lot to get caught up with as it is. And I don't want to leave out anybody on the super chats. And I don't think I'll get to them all if I don't, or if we have a bunch more that are added to what we already have. Using the current cabinet positions, can you make your ultimate cabinet team using only presidents? Andrew Jackson as head of Indian Affairs. Well, that would never happen. But of course, that's not really a cabinet post anymore. I guess we would have to go back to a time when the Bureau of Indian Affairs was kind of a cabinet level position, but that would actually be a really interesting exercise to do. I'm going to take a picture of that because I like that. David Stewart, great UK name. I see you even have kind of a Stewart emblem on your logo there. That's pretty cool. Do I think the U.S. could break the two-party system? It would take major changes to how our campaigns are funded. There's too much money supporting the two major parties. If we went to a system similar to what the UK has as far as how they do their elections, then yeah, it could be possible to break the two-party system. Or if we change to something like ranked choice voting, and I'm not saying we should go to that, but I think that would help. If Trump doesn't win the election, do I think it could end up as the Republican pick come next? No. Then again, I didn't think he would be this time. But listen, he's going to be In 4 years, he will be what? 82, which is the same age that Biden is now. And it would be quite hypocritical, wouldn't it, for the same people who said Biden was too old to then say Trump isn't. Not that that would necessarily stop people. Okay. And as for the last part, I'm not going to read that. Jacob, have I read any books by Mark A. Knoll? No, he wrote a book on the Civil War as a theological crisis. Interesting. I have not thought of it that way, but that's an interesting lens through which to view history. I don't know that I would call it a theological crisis, but I can see that component to it because you definitely had a very strong difference in the view of slavery as it relates to the Bible. I mean, the folks in the South who justified slavery used the Bible to justify it, whereas the folks in the North used the Bible to justify fighting to end slavery. So there definitely was a major theological component to your views on those things. But I never thought of it as a crisis, but that's interesting. American Nerd, how does this sound? We have a jungle primary system in the Electoral College, so we can have more candidates and parties to be represented in a first round than a runoff with the top 2 candidates. I'm open to anything at this point because what we're doing now certainly ain't working. I mean, we have 330 million people in this country, and those are the 2 that we ended up with. There's got to be a way to do better than that. What did I think of the presidential and VP debate? I didn't watch the presidential debate. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I just couldn't. I watched the commentary on it afterwards. But the vice presidential debate I thought was good. They were cordial. They were respectful. They shared ideas. I mean, there was still some of the same stuff you do in a debate, which is deflect and ignore the question or answer it without answering it, and using that time-honored tradition of don't answer the question they asked, answer the question you wish they had asked. So there's some of that stuff, but I thought by and large, it was the debate I wish the presidential debate had been. And it made me wish that Vance and Waltz were the candidates instead of Trump and Harris. And I think a lot of people felt that way. Adam, thank you for that. New Zealand, huh? Awesome. I hope to get there someday. Prince Abbasi, thank you. Germany could have had a chance at salvaging the situation had they not declared war on the U.S. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about because Germany declares war on the U.S. Now, I think the U.S. gets in that war at some point anyway, but Germany declares war on the U.S., and so the U.S. ends up determining on a Germany first strategy, which is let's defeat Germany first and then we'll deal with Japan. Now, it doesn't mean they weren't fighting in the Pacific, but the focus and the energy and the resources went into defeating Germany first. So how would that alone have been different if it was a Japan first strategy? How does Germany do then against the Soviets? I don't know. I mean, really, the thing was Germany needed to not invade the Soviet Union, but that's a whole different issue. Is there a channel we would like you to look at? How would we tell you? You can comment in the comments on videos. I read every comment on every video, even if I don't respond to it. Understand if you post a link, it'll automatically get filtered out, so you're not going to see it show up in the comments. I have to go in and manually approve those. It's an anti-spam feature because otherwise you get like bots posting porn and stuff like that. So anything with a link automatically gets filtered out, and then I have to go in and approve it. I have to go in and check the link and make sure it's safe, and then I'll approve it, and then the comment will show up. So it might not show up for a few hours to a day, depending on how long it takes me. But if you mention a channel in the comment section, I will see it. PT, thank you for that. What's your opinion on politicians globally feeding into tribalism? In a perfect world, you'd be conservative, but today you hate capitalism. Well, you know what? I think that's true in any system of government because you can have communism and have people have a lack of compassion. I mean, the Soviet Union to me was not a compassionate form of government, and that was communism. So capitalism, communism, socialism, those aren't the issues. Human nature is the problem. And no matter which system of government, which system of economics you have, as long as you have human beings involved, greed will be a factor. There will be a lack of compassion by people at the top, and it's always going to be that way, unfortunately. Not a question, but I thought you would find it interesting. You know, a close relative of a general who's a fan of my channel. Well, now you have to tell me who. What general? Oh, General Patton. That's awesome. I follow his granddaughter on Instagram, and she liked one of my comments recently, and I thought that was really awesome. Listen, I've made no secret of the fact that George S. Patton's one of my all-time favorite American generals. I think pound for pound, he was the best American general in the Second World War, or in the 20th century for that matter. He wasn't perfect, and he was good in his role, and I don't think I would have given him Ike's job. He wouldn't have been good in Ike's job. But for the role he had as the tip of the spear in command of an army, fantastic. Some things about his character that we can obviously talk about. But as a general, love him. I would love to know who it is, and I think that's fantastic. That excites me, and now I want to know who it is. And if they're a fan of my channel and they're watching, and you are the person who's a relative of General Patton, email me, vloggingthroughhistory@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you. Thank you, TW. Have you seen Roots and Roots video are all U.S. presidents? I think all but one, right? Isn't it? Is it Martin Van Buren that there's no known connection to King John? I haven't seen that specific video, but I have studied that topic before of almost all presidents being descended from King John. What's my favorite British sitcom? Blackadder. Oh, it's definitely Blackadder. It's so funny. It's history. It's some of the funniest people in British comedy. Other than that, probably Monty Python's Flying Circus. If you could call, that's not really a sitcom, though. I guess it's a comedy show. Films with Chase. Someone asked earlier where you want to go most. Got to say China. Yeah, China is on my list, and there will be a group trip to China at some point in the next year or two, for sure. American Nerd, as a YouTube historian, the best kind of historian, what is your opinion on the 1997 animated film? You should ask my daughter about that, because the first time my daughter watched it, she was like 7 or 8 years old, and I was watching her with it, and she got 5 minutes into it, and I said, Anastasia, this is all BS, right? Anastasia died. She was murdered with the rest of her family in July of 1918. She's like, Dad, why are you doing that? To this day, she's 19 now. She still talks about how I ruined Anastasia for her by telling her that it was fictitious and Anastasia was murdered with the rest of her family. But she was. I mean, that's just the facts. They have genetically proven that she was killed in Ekaterinburg with the rest of her family. Steven, what did I think of the game? Honestly, for as many things that went against Ohio State in that game, all the big plays they gave up, that freak kickoff that bounced off one of the Ohio State players, the turnovers, just the bad defense. It's a small miracle that Ohio State had a chance to win that game at the end. And had it not been for a bonehead play by one of our superstar freshmen, we would have won that game. So I'm not that upset about it. I thought Oregon played great. They deserved to win. And we'll probably see each other again in the playoffs. So I think Ohio State and Oregon will both be in the playoffs at the end of the year. So it'll be interesting. Could I look at Biden's Japanese history as a textbook series? Interesting. Yeah, and I'd love to learn some more Japanese history, Alex, for sure. Leviticus Prime, AI songs in Iron Maiden style. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do some more of these AI songs. They're fun. They're just entertaining. It's just kind of a fun, stupid thing to do with this new tool we have of AI. How are people undecided in this election cycle? Either way, I mean, Joshua, is that a reason to vote for somebody or against somebody? Like, Trump being a felon does not automatically want to make me vote for Kamala Harris, and Trump being set up doesn't automatically make me want to vote for him. So I think you're just simplifying it to saying that it's either or. That's making an issue that black and white that's actually all sorts of gray. I have multiple reasons why I just can't in good conscience vote for Trump that have to do with a lot of other factors. And there's a lot of reasons why I can't vote for Kamala Harris that aren't as simple as one issue or one factor. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think it's less undecided and more decided they can't vote for either one of them kind of thing. And some of those people may yet vote for one of them when it comes down to it. Battle fact: during the Battle of Tondibi, the Songhai Empire tried to charge cattle toward invading Moroccans, but they had guns, which caused the cows to turn around and charge the Songhai. That's fantastic. I'd never have heard that story before, but that's really, really cool. Colby, thank you for that. Longtime viewer. Wondering my view on premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. That's a deep topic that deserves a stream of its own. And what he's talking about is the biblical view of like the end times. And there's this thing called the millennium. I used to be a strong premillennialist. I was one of those people that was all about the end times according to Left Behind, the series, which is a fantastic fiction series, by the way, Left Behind. At this point, honestly, I'm undecided about it. I'm more of a wait and see what happens, and maybe I'll be around for it, maybe I won't. I don't really have a strong opinion, and to me, honestly, issues like that, I know it's a cop-out, but they don't matter that much to me because they have no impact whatsoever on my Christian faith and on how I live my life and how I preach and how I lead people to follow Christ. My following of Christ, my living as a Christian is not impacted in any way by what the end times are going to look like and what heaven looks like or any of that stuff. To me, it's not something worth fighting over because it's honestly irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. It's not to say that theology doesn't matter and that those kinds of topics aren't worth discussing, but to me, I just don't see how it impacts my daily life in any way. Do I like any historic national flags over modern flags? Yeah, the German Empire flag is the first one that would come to my mind as well. It's a great flag. I mean, some of the old flags that the Teutonic Order had, with that cross. Oh, yeah, I love that stuff. All right, so I'm going to say at this point, I'm only now at Super Chats from 22 minutes ago. So any Super Chats that come in after 5:30, I can't promise that I'm going to get to them. So, I know that you don't like Oliver Stone's JFK movie, but if you want to watch a historical movie of his, 1995's Nixon, I have seen it. That actually is really good. And Anthony Hopkins, I thought, did a great job in that movie. Have I read any translations of Christian texts from the Tang Dynasty of China? No, I have not. Interesting. That's something I'll have to look into. Do I know how the U.S. intervened in the presidential election in Chile, 1970? That's not a topic I'm familiar with, Matthias, unfortunately. So I wish I could help you. Maybe somebody else in the chat knows a little bit more about that. Jamie, I would love to stop in Derry, but unfortunately, as it is, I only have like a day and a half in Belfast. So to go all the way up to Derry would probably not be a good use of my time on this trip. I'm definitely going to go back to Ireland probably sometime in 2025. So yeah, Halloween capital. I knew that Halloween was born, Sam Hain was born in Ireland. So I will spend more time in Ireland on the next trip. I just don't have a lot of time on this one, unfortunately. I'm interested in medical history. Patrick Kelly, another Irish name, does a lot of really thorough stuff that's pretty well researched. That's cool. And I like there's a mortician lady that does some really interesting videos as well, and I've watched some of her stuff. Any church fathers that you admire? Not real into that stuff, but there's a few. I mean, St. Ignatius is one. Benedict, I've been to the Benedictine monastery. I've been to Benedict's grave in Italy, and that was really cool. But honestly, especially not growing up Catholic, I didn't study those a whole lot. SM 2022, thank you, or 2022. if you could have an answer to any historic mystery, what would it be? How about the truth of Jack the Ripper? While I would absolutely love to know the answer to that, I think there are probably deeper historic mysteries that I'd like to have the answers to than that. Let me think about that for a minute. I'm sure some people are saying some good stuff in the chat about this one too. I'm going to look and see what some other people are saying, just to see if any other good ideas come to mind. Who killed JFK? See, to me, that's not a mystery. Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. So to me, I mean, that's a pretty well done thing. Spooky Boy, I don't think that is a question. Whatever you think about the Gospels and the truth of Jesus as far as miracles and stuff, the fact there was a historical Jesus, I don't think is really up for debate. There definitely was a historical Jesus. Even if you're not a Christian, even if you don't subscribe to the miracles and to the accounts of the Gospels, there was definitely a Jesus. So I don't know. Jack the Ripper probably would be the one for me. Do I think the Rogan Trump podcast will be impactful? No, because you know who's going to listen to that? People who are already voting for Trump. I think it's just like a lot of things on both sides. It's just an echo chamber. It'll get talked about for a few days, but I don't see anything significantly moving the bar at this point. I think everybody's pretty well set in how they're voting. Why do so many working class Americans support a billionaire? Why shouldn't a billionaire be a good president? Just as easy to support a billionaire as it is to support somebody who's not. Somebody's status as a billionaire to me doesn't matter whether they're a good president or not. If I vote for Donald Trump or against him, it's not because he's a billionaire. It's because I think he would do a good job or I agree with his policies. His money, so what? That doesn't matter to me. It might matter to some people, and that's fine. People can use whatever criteria they want to determine who they want to vote for. Do I think running a business and running a country is the same thing? No, but there are similarities, and I think I'd rather have somebody running the country who ran a business than, say, had been a musician all his life, or a janitor, or a teacher. I think business running or being a governor probably prepare you as much as anything can. Nothing prepares you to be president. It's a job unlike any other job. So anybody who's coming into it is going to come into it with a certain level of unpreparedness for that role. And I think that's why so often when people are running for president, they make certain promises that I think they fully intend to keep. But when they become president, they find out realities that they didn't understand when they were running for the office, that only someone who's in the office can understand. And it changes what you're able to do and what you're even wanting to do. First time catching one of the streams, Jared. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. How do you think historians will look back on this current political era in 30 years? I think we'll look back at it as one more shift in the party systems. It happens every 40 years or so. We undergo a political shift. And I think that will be the biggest takeaway from this era, is that it was a realigning of the political landscape. More than any one person, though, I think Donald Trump will be the most prominent figure in that realignment. How people lined up either for him or against him largely is determining the way that things are going to shake out. But that'll be one factor of it. And I honestly believe, and I know a lot of people argue with me about this, and it tends to be people who think that January 6th was one of the absolute worst days in the history of our country. I'm not downplaying that it was an awful thing, but I do not think it was nearly the big deal that a lot of people seem to think it is. I do not think we were on the verge of having democracy overthrown. Let's say for 1 minute that they had stopped the counting and the certification of the vote. Within a couple of days, it would have all been sorted, and the outcome would have been no different. They would have gotten the National Guard in there. They would have gotten those people to disperse with tear gas or something. Then they would have gathered and certified the vote, and everything would have gone ahead as it did. There was no scenario in that January 6th event that happened where Donald Trump was staying in office. There was no scenario where that was happening, even if that was what Trump wanted to happen. He wasn't calling up the military and doing a coup and taking over the government. That was never going to happen. That's why I say it wasn't nearly the big deal that everybody's making it out to be, and especially when people start saying that it's the biggest crisis, the biggest threat to our democracy in our country's history. That's ridiculous. We had a civil war, for God's sake. We've had presidents assassinated. We've had far worse things happen than that. I'm not saying it wasn't an awful thing that happened and it wasn't a stain on our country that people did that. But I think in 40 years, people are not going to look back on it and say it the way people are saying it right now. I think it'll be the political realignment that we look back at. My opinion on the Libertarian Party. They probably represent my views slightly better than the Republican Party does right now, but not enough to get me to vote for them. There's certain things with the Libertarians that I just shake my head, as bad as I shake my head at some things that Democrats and Republicans do. There are some things on which the Libertarians do reflect my views, but what do I mean? Don't mess with Canada. Aren't they the nice friends of the North who you can't say a word about? Yes, but you get them in war and they're hardcore. Just look into some of the Canadian units in World War I and World War II. Don't mess with Canadians when death is on the line. That's all I'm saying. You are Canadian. You agree you have the best, but the narrative is now we are berserkers. It's not true. There isn't no malice there. Listen, I mean, Canadians were strong fighters. They were brave. They did jobs that a lot of other soldiers didn't have to do. Places like Passchendaele in World War I. They held the line when the first gas attack happened on the Western Front. When everybody else ran, it was the Canadians who plugged the gap and saved the Western Front. Bastian, thank you for becoming a member. Would I consider myself more of a conservative? Neither really. I'm more of a center right. I don't know what you'd call me at this point. I don't have a clue because I don't even know where I come down in the political realignment that's happening right now. I feel like a political orphan. I don't have anybody who really represents me that I feel like, yeah, that person feels the way I do. There's none of them right now. I don't know. Take it from a Dubliner, steer clear of the city center and Talbot Street. Newgrange is on my list of things I want to get to, and the Boyne while I'm there. Yeah, those are places that I haven't nailed down my itinerary yet, but those are two places that are pretty high on my list. Love your content from a Turkish Muslim born and living in Germany. Yeah, you're seeing absolutely. This is what I say to people about that, because I've heard people, for example, badmouth Muslims and badmouth Christians. And I've lost track of the number of times people have gotten to know me, found out I was a Christian after they got to know me, and then was like, wow, you're nothing like I would have expected a Christian to be. And I find myself thinking, well, do you really know many Christians? What I think happens is, and this is true not just with religion, it's true with politics too. The loudest, most extreme voices end up rightly or wrongly representing all of them. And so for a lot of people, 9/11 is what a Muslim is, even though that's not who most Muslims are, because they were the extremists and they did something that all the world saw. People found out they were Muslims and they did it because of their faith, and they applied that rationale and that reasoning and that line of thinking to all Muslims. Whereas the Muslims I know are incredibly generous, kind, hardworking, loving people who I would love to have as good friends. Every Muslim I've met in person and gotten to know has been that way. And people say that about me as a Christian. Well, you're nothing like the bigots and the hypocrites that I see on TV. Well, no, because those people on TV don't represent most Christians, and the people on social media don't represent most Christians. They're just the really loud voices that say extreme things that get talked about. Most people are like you and me. They're good people who want to just see everyone get along and do their best, and happen to have differences in terms of what we believe. So I'm with you 100% on that. Crabman, I saw your video on Fort Necessity. Oh, that was an old video. I want to get back down there. Yes, you grew up in Latrobe. Very cool. In fact, I'm thinking that sometime early next week, I might drive down to Washington, D.C. for a couple of days. I need to do some research at the National Archives, and I might stop over at Arlington National Cemetery for a day and do some videos. And I might, if I do that, I might stop back down at Fort Necessity and redo those videos with some better quality content now that I've got better equipment and know what I'm doing a little better than I did 4 years ago when I made that video. Yeah, it's some really cool history down there east of Pittsburgh. Raziel's Legacy, how you doing? Rooting for Cleveland now that the Royals are out. I was really pulling for the Royals. I wanted the Royals to beat the Yankees in that series. I think everybody who's not a New York Yankee fan wants to see Cleveland win that series. Have I seen Hakeem's video denying the Tiananmen Square massacre? I've heard about it. I've had people recommend it to me, but I haven't seen it yet. Are all your tours for historical purposes? Yes, just because that's what I do, right? It's about history. That's what I love. Doesn't mean that everything on the tours is strictly history. So we did an Italy tour last April, and I've got another group tour going to Italy, and we're going to go to Florence, and we're going to go up to a Tuscan farm. Has nothing to do with history, but it's really cool. We got to eat there. We got to drink wine that was made on that farm. We ate lasagna that was made on that farm, and it was amazing and beautiful. And everybody who was there, we were all there because we loved history, but we had a blast with that. So it doesn't mean the tours are all strictly history, but they are focused primarily on history. Very random question. Your surname is Young, and your dad always talked about it being a popular American slave surname. That could be if Young was a popular slave-owning surname. Most of the slave surnames came from the owners of those slaves. And it seems strange when you think about it in hindsight that a person once freed would want to take on the name of their owner, but it's what a lot of them did. So it's certainly possible that Young is a name for slave surname. I couldn't give you any specific facts to back that up, but I wouldn't be surprised by that. What agencies or departments should the U.S. abolish? You say IRS, CIA, NSA, FBI, Secret Service. Now, I wouldn't go that far. I would abolish the Department of Education, the IRS. Those are the only ones I would say for sure. The Postal Service, yeah. I think those three I would be on board with: the IRS, the Postal Service, and the Department of Education. I think we could do without those. If I looked into a little more, there could be some other ones too. Bilal, thank you. Love the Lamino Jack the Ripper series. Zodiac. Yeah, but it sounds like they might have some leads on Zodiac. I don't remember exactly the details, but I feel like there were some things related to that if I remember right. But yeah, I mean, it's probably one of those things, the person's probably dead now, and we're probably never going to know for sure. Your pastor reminds us that regardless of who wins the election, it doesn't change the fact Jesus is king to Christians. 100%, Taylor. And I tell people that all the time. And I actually was talking about that just today in church, in Sunday school. We were talking about prayer. And I said, you know what? Like it or not, as a Christian, we have an obligation, a biblical obligation to pray as strongly and as fervently for either person if they get elected. We don't just pray for the ones that we voted for. We need to pray just as strongly for wisdom and direction and success for the one we didn't vote for. And I think it was George H.W. Bush, who was beat by Bill Clinton in the election of 1992. One-term president, leaves a note for Bill Clinton, who had beat him for that office. And I don't remember the exact words, but among the things he left in that note in the Oval Office was, I'm pulling for you. Your success is the country's success. And that's, as Christians, how it should be too, that we should be praying for the people in authority over us, whether we voted for them or not. And it should not change how I live my life one iota, who's elected president. That's why I don't get too worked up about elections anymore. Because while I have my beliefs and I have what I care about, the day after the election, I'm going to wake up and we're going to have a new president elect, and my life's going to go on. and it's not going to be the end of the world either way. You were at Chateau Thierry. Very cool. So if you guys aren't familiar with Chateau Thierry, it's right on the Marne River. It's where the 3rd Infantry Division got their name. Rock of the Marne was right there. It's real close to Belleau Wood, where the Marines, of course, made a name for themselves at Belleau Wood in 1918. Chateau Thierry is a pretty cool place to visit. I love that part of France. Since we have a movie about Ronald Reagan, whether the president should have a movie made about them. Gerald Ford. So there was one, I think it was about first ladies, though. It was about 3 first ladies, but one of them was Betty Ford, and it tells some of Gerald Ford's story. I think Aaron Eckhart played Gerald Ford, and that was decent. That was pretty good. I learned some things there I didn't know about Gerald Ford in that one. I want a movie about Grant. I want a legit Hollywood epic about Ulysses S. Grant. His story from childhood is perfect for a Hollywood movie. And it's a crime that we haven't gotten one yet. We also need a really good Theodore Roosevelt movie. Metatron's video about how fascism sits in the political spectrum. People are way too quick to label others. And as I said in that one, Plebeian Bear, I think it boils down to people wanting fascism to be what they are not, so that they can label their political opponents as that thing. I think that's the only reason we get so worked up about it being right wing or left wing. And there are people who are adamant that fascism is right wing, and there are people who are adamant that it's left wing. And that's why I said at the beginning, it doesn't matter. It's its own thing, and we can condemn it whether we're on the left or the right, and we don't have to label it as one or the other just to score political opponents or political points against the people we don't like. Steven, saw your reaction to Mr. Beats amendment video. Why do I have such anti-democratic sentiment? What was anti-democratic about it? Is it anti-democratic to have restrictions on who can vote? No. If that's the case, why don't we let 5-year-olds vote? There's a reason we don't let 5-year-olds vote. There's a reason we don't let people who, in certain states where states have banned people with felonies on their record from voting. That's the choice they have. But I mean, we have restrictions on voting. Is that anti-democratic? I don't think so. I think it safeguards our elections. Believing in the Electoral College, is that anti-democratic? Yeah, but that's intentional. That's why the founding fathers didn't want us to be a pure democracy. We are a federal republic for a reason. And the Electoral College is part of being a federal republic. We're not a pure democracy. Federal republic is a form of democracy because we still vote for the people who represent us. But those, to me, are not incompatible with democracy at all. Caden, thank you. VTH got me into genealogy. You have great-great-grandparents who were on opposite sides of the Anglo-Boer War. Wow, and got married after. I bet there's probably a lot of that in South Africa, just because of the mix of cultures, and you have Dutch people who came there and English people who came there, and you have the indigenous people who were there, all kind of mixing together. That's actually a really fascinating place to research genealogy, I would imagine, because of all of that. American Nerd, thank you. And we're going to wrap this up here in a few minutes. I said I couldn't guarantee that we'd do any of the super chats past 5:30, so I'm going to try to fly through these post 5:30 ones as quickly as I can. Favorite things to do during Halloween? Honestly, I don't do much for Halloween. I'm not into scary movies. Mostly what I do is I sit out in my driveway and I pass out candy, and I comment on how much I like people's outfits. That's really about all I do. Gideon, the way people treated pop star Chappelle Roan, am I saying that right? When she said she wouldn't endorse Harris. I'm not really familiar with her, but I think that is terrible. I don't think people should listen. If Taylor Swift wants to support Kamala Harris and use the platform that she has earned through her superstardom and music, she's entitled to do that. And if somebody on the right wants to do the same thing with Donald Trump, they're entitled to do that. And if people want to say, you know what, I don't like either one of them, they're entitled to do that. And I'm entitled to think they're crazy or to not listen to them or to support them. But I don't think people should be giving them a hard time because they express their views. Everybody should be able to do Jordan, thank you. Also got into tracing ancestry. You have a 4th-generation grandfather who fought in the Boer War. There's the Boer War again. This is crazy. I guess what I'm hearing from all of this today is that we need to set up a group trip to South Africa and go to some of these sites. Go to the Zulu War sites. Go to some of the Boer War sites. Love from Ireland. Jordan, you should come. Hopefully in the next week or two, I'm going to announce some kind of a meetup in Dublin. So you should come if I do that. American Nerd, Roanoke Colony said, oh, yes, that's a really good one. The answer to what happened to the Roanoke Colony. I have my opinions on that. I think they were probably carried off. And I think some of them are probably my ancestors because I have Melungeon ancestors. And one of the theories about where the Melungeons came from is from the Roanoke Colony. Hello from New Zealand. Some videos about New Zealand wars or British colonial wars. Awesome. Well, I actually was just talking to somebody about going to New Zealand at some point in the near future. If I do, I'll definitely do some videos while I'm there about that. Yeah, somebody asked me this one earlier, Fanta Consumer. I'm definitely going to do some more campaign trail. Sorry, I'm going to fly through these last few here. Canada should be annexed by the United States in the name of Manifest Destiny. I don't know that our Manifest Destiny ever concerned making it to the Arctic Circle. They're practically America with socialized medicine. They're America's hat. They're nice America, right? Sure, why not? You upload gaming with commentary. You've been interviewing AI presidents, and you're going to uploading them separately. That would actually be really interesting, Jedi Jared. Email me about that. Ninja Vestas, what are your thoughts on Donald Trump? You despise him. You're from the UK. Love the oversimplified reactions to your second cousin's husband as the ambassador to Malta, to the United States for Malta. That's cool. Donald Trump, I don't think he's that intelligent. I think by and large, at least during his term in office, I agreed with most of his policies. I don't like him as a person. I don't think he'll do a great job in a second term. I guess that's about all I could say about it. Do I know much about New Zealanders in the LRP, LRDG in the desert in World War II? No, not really. Or the 20th Maori Battalion. Funny thing about Maoris is that's the closest you can find in video games to how my last name is pronounced. So when I play FIFA, for example, I usually use the name Maori as my name because it sounds like they're saying my last name when I play FIFA. New Zealanders were great soldiers. I don't know much about World War II, but I know a lot about their history in World War I. And the Anzacs were fantastic in World War I. Billy the Dog, thank you for becoming a member. Radio Spec, never finished your history degree, but want to self-study to get as close as you can to the doctorate you never got. What books, papers, mediums, and methods would you recommend? Oh, there's so many. I mean, I would find, number one, I'd find a topic you're really interested in, but then find another topic that you don't know anything about, but you'd like to learn about that's kind of outside of your wheelhouse. And then consume everything you can about it. Find every highly rated book. Find all the YouTube videos that you can about it. And you know what? Get into research. I love research. Like when I got into the Civil War, I loved going to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and looking through pension files from the Civil War. There was so much great information. There were original letters that people wrote in these pension files. Really cool to see those firsthand sources. Look at newspaper articles. Look at what people were saying at the time. When I studied World War I, I started looking at newspaper articles in the States that were describing what was happening with Alvin York or the Lost Battalion to get an idea of what was happening in real time. Not just what's written now about an event 100 years ago, but what was being written at the time. It's a really fascinating insight into those things. Martin, Third ID, Fort Stewart represent, top of the rock. So yeah, Third ID got their name Rock of the Marne because when the Battle of the Marne was happening in the summer of 1918 and everybody else had retreated, it was a couple of machine gun battalions from the Third ID that held the line. And I'm especially in love with the Third ID because my great uncle was in the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division in Korea. Fought on the front lines in the Korean War with the Third ID, my Uncle Paul. So love the Third ID. And one of my son's teammates on his soccer team, his dad is, I think, still active duty in the 3rd Infantry Division. Besides Wilson and Johnson, who else were awful presidents? Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan. I don't think Bush 43 was an awful president, though. I mean, historically speaking, probably middle of the road. And he did not steal the 2000 election from Gore. I will die on that hill. Gore lost that election. There was recount after recount. No recount ever gave Gore the election. Gore lost that election. Like a Bill Clinton movie starring Matthew McConaughey before he gets too old. Oh, man. I don't know if he'd be the best one for it. I wish we had Phil Hartman. I loved his Bill Clinton. Joe Caldwell, did I watch the vice presidential debate? Yeah, I commented on this a little bit ago. I thought it was a good debate. I thought both of them had a mix of good answers and policy discussion with the usual debate strategies of avoiding questions and deflecting and answering questions they weren't asked and stuff like that. But I thought it was a much better debate than we had in the presidential debate for sure. All right, last two. Opinion on Douglas Haig as a World War I general. Better than I think people give him credit for. And undermined greatly by his prime minister, David Lloyd George, who was a scumbag. And that's another hill I'll die on. David Lloyd George was horrible and did a lot to really undercut Haig's ability to command the BEF in the last 2 years of the war. I think Haig was better than people give him credit for, but still not great. He was decent in a war where most people were awful. All right. Walshmeister, thank you. In the future, will I react to a video called Tex Talks History, the greatest con in early aviation, the Dr. Christmas story on the Black Pants Legion on YouTube? That is a really long title, but I'll take a picture so I can check that out. All right. Last couple here. Thoughts on ranked choice voting. I hate it. I know it's on the ballot in 5 states. I know Mr. Beat loves it. I shouldn't say I hate it. I haven't liked how it's been implemented so far. In the places where it's been used, I don't think the outcome got any better. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see if it gets implemented in those states and how. I need to see more evidence of it, right? I guess that's what I'm saying. Let me see what it looks like after we implement it in a few places. Stephen, disagree completely about that. 100%. The founding fathers were right, and I will die on that hill too. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody that was in the stream. Sorry if I didn't get to your question. We'll do this again real soon. If I do go to Washington, D.C. this week, I'll probably do a live stream from my hotel room Tuesday or Wednesday. All right, thanks. We'll see you soon.